This is a structure known as the Wheel of Giants. It's found in the Golan Heights area, and since we were recently in the Jordan area showing you circular structures that look just like those in South Africa that apparently are related to the Natufian people, and Natufians are known to have become the Badarian Akkad people of pre-dynastic Egypt. Since we're in the area, I thought I would show you this video here that comes off of an old article. But and there's some good footage that I found from a colleague. But where this is just a little northeast of the Jordan area that we were looking at, and Golan Heights. And if any of you that are probably above 40 or 50 years old will remember the name of Golan Heights, and there was lots of warfare during this place, and then the war that was named of the area and stuff that went on and due to Israel and stuff like that. And there are connections with this and with this ancient place that's here. Now there are alignments that they have found that hook this up to seasons and things along that line, and it looks like places of it might have been collection areas for granary and then protection sites for it, but also at the same time built to make a structure which symbolized in its shape that is some type of Stonehenge. In fact, sadly, this is known as the Stonehenge of Golan Heights, and you can look it up and you'll see that too. And that's where they try to correlate to it, because their first initial findings, which are kind of sketchy at best, and I'll go into that later, are dating it to roughly the time of Stonehenge, whereas something like this pales in comparison to Stonehenge and its colossal rock building, but yet still shows those exact same alignments. And I tell you that it does so for a reason. And this was from ancient times, and from a lot older than they give credit for their radiocarbon dating. And their pottery sample seems to deal with surface found materials in the spot, and that they haven't even really done any true archaeological excavation of the site. Now usually this would involve probing in a few places, and they find something and then start going from there, and apparently they did some little type of excavation and then dropped it. Also, there appears to be someone buried later in the middle of this, and that can happen and has happened in a few other situations. And there can be some conjecture on why that was also, and we'll get into that because of what this area is supposed to have been in your Bible and its reality of what it may have been in reality. We're going to go into that here, so let's look at this article here. We'll just go back up to the top. Wheel of the Giants, mysterious complex of circles, prehistoric Stonehenge monument in the Middle East. And this was done in the end of March. Ellen Lloyd of AncientPagans.com. One of the most mysterious structures in the Middle East is the prehistoric stone monument that went unnoticed for centuries in the Golan Heights, probably because it's not visible on the ground but only from the air, like some type of Nazca ruins. And that's what we're finding now is, with satellite images and even Google Earth, you're able to find all these things, and archaeology is starting to be spurred on by Google Earth, believe it or not. And we'll mention that a few times throughout all of this, but and some videos coming up, definitely. And the piece of video that I have in this, found from, again, CFAP's channel, hoots out to him, and you definitely need to check out his work, for he has put out thousands of videos on ancient Indian burial mounds, which I'm not so much into. And then looking at his knowledge, there's not much more you can add to it. He leaves things quite wide open, but pretty much you have to. But then if you watch enough of them, you start to get a gist of things. But he just doesn't want to go there at all, and I can understand and respect that. But I'm kind of a guy that goes a little bit farther with it, and I'm waiting for the point that I can go all the way with it, if you will. Let's see if I can get this to set up just right. No, I'm gonna have to go right there, something like that. But because I noticed that I was telling you in the upcoming video series, my first of the year type concept that got ruined here at the that I should have been doing right around New Year's Eve, but was banned due to BS. Anyhow, um, about upcoming videos, and that not only is Göbekli Tepe there, but there are many around that area, and we've already talked about Catalhoyuk at least 3 different times, but other places that are related to that, like there are places related to Catalhoyuk, and we've got that going on, but then we found this, and it's 3,000-4,000 years before that. And what's amazing about this, and that I find it amazing that people aren't jumping on this more and more excited about it, is that, you know, you say, well, 3,000 or 4,000 years more. Well, 3,000 or 4,000 years ago was 2000 BC, and that's the burgeoning of what we understood whenever I was a kid. And people are still trying to pinpoint things like, wasn't much going on till about then, and so on, right? But we're finding that there was a meeting of people, that some people had this and some people had that and some people had that, and inquiring, intelligent minds put it all together. We all look at it as putting it back together too, somehow, in some ways, and it shows you that perhaps there was something that goes back much older than the time that we talk about. And let's look at this, and then we'll go into some footage and then maybe come back to this. It's known locally as Rahim El Hiri in Arabic, meaning stone heap of the wild cat. The complex have 5 concentric circles, the largest more than 500 feet, and I think it's 520 feet, and a massive burial chamber in the middle. Its Hebrew name is Gilgal Rephaim, and that's said to mean wheel of the giants, and it refers to an ancient race of giants that are mentioned in the Bible, and such as King Og of the Rephaim, and people that were near there, and the children of Anak that you hear about in the famous story whenever they saw them and they were but grasshoppers, and things along that line. And of course the famous giant that we know about from Gath, and Goliath, and how he was taken by David. But what this is also showing you is that there's a clear denotion that there are these people that are listed as being giants. And a lot of it has gotten way exaggerated. And you can see this in some of these tales in the Bible alone and other mythologies. But in reality, what we're looking at is people here that are well over 6 foot. Females seem to be 6 foot, dealing with people that are barely breaking 5 foot. The Septuagint and Dead Sea Scrolls show that Goliath of God was 6'9", as he was 3 cubits in a span or whatever, and then all of a sudden they throw another cubit on it, and one and another and another, and the next thing you know, he must be 14, 15 foot tall. And they did that in a way because these people, you know, that people were shorter back in the day, and there was a lot of these castles and things that were built that have barely over 5 foot tall doorways and things like that, right? And so everybody would have to be stooping down into them if they were taller. It denotes also that these people were smaller back in the day, but taller than they had used to been. Coming back from a great catastrophe that seemed to have set people back in their height and things like that, there were still these people that did have extreme height. And it may have been a constraint for them somewhat too. And we know those as Cro-Magnons, but now we're led to have the name that's no longer used, and now we just talk about early European farmers. are early European hunter-gatherers, actually. But if one looks into the fact that they are non-prognostic, and what that is shown with every other culture, that might pinpoint to a reality of how long that some type of different lifestyle was being utilized by certain people well into that time. Anyhow, there's strong evidence that biblical giants of the Rephaim of the Bible were the architects to the circle of the Rephaim, or the circle of the giants. One biblical passage says, "For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnants of the Rephaim and the giants that were in the land in those days." And so there's a coming, and I've told you long ago, and if you've been watching my series, that long ago a set of people had come down, and we see it forming Egypt and doing all these things, but these people had come down, and apparently this is the end of whenever they had got knocked out and melded between. There are the stories of when the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and then those were giants, and they were men of well-renowned. Only that well-renowned is being squashed out as mythology and all types of things, but the concept of what it speaks of speaks volumes of truth to people that look deep enough. Now, Rayum El-Hiri, which is very much like Rahim, El-Hiri, which is very much like Hiri or Hurrians in Arabic, mean the stone heap of the wild cat. And there are mythological statements that, well, of course, we know there were like lions up in this area too of that time. You can see them in Sumerian art and art all around this entire area, all the way up through and in Europe. And you wonder about why these people had an idea of it. Well, they were back in the land of lions at one time, but it became the master of beasts. You no longer see them. There was a different, larger type of lion that's related to, that is all up in the north and was going over into the Americas, and there was a giant lion, other than the saber-toothed tiger everybody knows about, in the Americas. Did a video about it last year, did a video about where camels come from, and things along that line, and that they are very much snow abilities in that animal versus what we have and where we think they come from, and where we're just kind of led to believe. Just leave it out there. So the complex has 5 concentric circles, largest more than 500 feet or 152 meters wide, and a massive burial chamber in the middle. Its Hebrew name is Gilgal Rephaim, and it's said to mean will of the giants, referred to that ancient race of giants in the Bible. But Gal can easily be a loan word. And the Sumerians had Gilgal, and it didn't mean wheel. In fact, Gal meant large or great, because Lugal was the ancient name of the big priest kings, and it means great man or giant man. But I've told you before that it doesn't necessarily mean that they were giants. For whenever you say somebody is a giant of golf, you know, he's a giant in the world of golf, that doesn't necessarily mean that he is a great man in the world of golf. In fact, Corey Pavin's quite the diminutive guy, but he is a giant in the world of golf. You understand what I'm saying, right? Anyhow, not to get off so much, but Lugal, and Lu was basically man, and Gal was great man. So the great Rephaim that are there, but Rephaim are said to be giants, but only by people who are much more diminutive in size, as there were a few groups of people, and even pygmies at this time that we know of and we're aware of, that knew of that, but very few that were taller. And there are, of course, giant Nordic-sized people that are told about in the ancient tales, and giants too. for whenever the first people had come in there. And what we're led to believe is the first people who come in there, there was 2 waves of that. Not to go into everything all separately from this, but to try to make connections. And if you've been watching my videos, you kind of know what I'm alluding to, because I sound like I'm being very vague. In Genesis 14:5, the Rephaim inhabited a place called Ashtaroth Karnaim, and Ashtaroth is an ancient worshiping god that they have there, and it goes with Astera, which it goes with Asherah, and who used to be God's wife. If you look in the Bible, there are connections to all of that. And this Karnaim, just 10 miles from the rings, is the site of an ancient Canaanite city called Ashtaroth. Very similar. And I showed you in biblical series and stuff how that all worked together, and did it again in the demon series thing that I did, but God, that's been 3 years ago. I may have turned all those off. Anyhow, in Joshua 12:4, King Og of Bashan, who's known to have been a giant, was the last of the Rephaim. He lived at Ashtaroth, who ruled a territory stretching from Mount Hermon in the north down to there. And so there were giants in the land in those days and after. And people wonder, well, if there's a flood that took out everybody except for Noah's kids, then how could there have been giants in the land in the days after? Were they strong enough to get up onto a mountaintop that was like Ararat and make it through it? Were they part of Noah's genetics, which clearly says that it wasn't necessarily? Or we're led to believe that it dictates that, because they're talking about the other. And the other, listed as Satan, just meant the adversaries. And everybody's got it decided as who is the good guys and who's the bad guys, so you can figure that out on your own. And sometimes a light bulb goes off on what reality was, and this is the story of one group of people, and everybody is taking it on to being everything. And I've shown you that a lot of people, including myself, can just tear the thing apart. But at the same time, I'm trying to show you even where their story comes from and the reality of it all. In Chronicles 20, the last of the Anakim is killed, and yet again there was a war at Gath, where was a man of great stature, whose fingers and toes were 24, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot. He also was the son of the giant. But whenever he defied Israel, Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, David's brother-in-law, slew him. This is an echo because we have the thing of David. One moment. These were born unto the giant in Gath, and there they fell by the hand of David, who slew Goliath, and by the hand of his servants. Notice here also that he was the son of a giant, an Elohim. And this has to do with El, of the Bible, Temple and Chapel, Angel. They have names like Ariel, Michael, Gabriel. Simple prophets were named Ezekiel, Nathaniel, Daniel, which is Daniel, and it continues on. And people are saying, oh, well, El just means God. And it's like, really? Because for the people that they're all talking about, that was God's name, as we think of Yahweh. In fact, he had a wife that was named Asherah. I'll be damned, doesn't that sound neat? But he had a kid named Baal. Yeah. They had an entire pantheon, and some say Yahweh comes from the actual volcano god that they originally had a long time ago, and people had to sacrifice to it for some reason, and then that was the reason that you don't find enough burials in this area, that there was a period of time that there was all kinds of weird sacrifices that sound to come out of some kind of Dungeons and Dragons movie that you see, and Perseus and sacrificing to ancient gods and all kinds of things. And some reality has been found in all of that, and I try to help share it with you. But here's that circle, but let's take a closer look at it here. Blow it up. Hopefully CFAPS doesn't mind in any way, and y'all need to check out his channel for sure. The if he does mind, and CFAPS, if you've seen this or whatever you do mind, just let me know and I'll cut it out, and I'll try to do my own Google Maps on this same type situations here. But here we have the area that we're looking at, and this is, you know, the Holy Line and the Gaza Strip that runs up through from below, and Dead Sea, and then Sea of Galilee, Ili, and Ili and Ilu are gods, and the gods created this lake. How did it happen? Well, it was just a sunken in spot that's really below sea level, but it's on a fault line, and apparently, and it may have happened prior to this point before, but whenever the island of Santorini blew up and all the bullshit happened, there was enough of a tidal wave that came in and able to fill this thing up, and ended up turning it extremely salty, and there's no rain in this area anymore. And so, like the Great Salt Lake City in Utah, it is evaporated down to the point it's so thick that supposedly no one in recorded history has ever drowned there. You want to teach your kids how to swim, I mean, it looks like they're laying on a raft when they're just laying on their backs. And whenever people are standing up in the water, and usually you're about top of your shoulders floating, you actually look like you're standing up waist high in water. It's an oddity. Should have shot a picture of it there, but let's take a look at this, because we're coming down, just venting over this edge here, and not too far, but inside this area, and you will not see it here. But one thing I'd like to denote is the snake, or the serpent, that's on here, and some people denoted to him right off the bat. There's a snake, and he doesn't ever look right in here, and I think you ought to look in right in there too, but that's the ass of the snake, or where it left behind or shed its skin, and it seems to show a little bit more. Supposedly he measured this, and it's the same size as the Nazca serpent, which appears to be the same type of way. There's this building up in here he talks about, though, and where we're looking, you really can't see it here if you can, but there's this triangle here that he's going to show later too, and all these places that apparently don't have archaeology. I'm sure some people are slightly aware, and if they ever did something like this, they might be well aware of things that some people probably don't want to come out and continue to keep coming out. Let's take that in a few more steps, and you can see that snake symbology. It's over 500 foot around. There's a little 3D look at it a little bit, and he takes a little outback look on it here shortly. That's one of the pictures of it. Walls are supposedly 15 foot tall or so, and they've been crumbled down somewhat, but they say that they must have been a little taller than that. And then of course they haven't ever dug the soil out of that place to see how deep the walls go, but they're some 10-12 foot in places, 15 foot in others in their thicknesses, which is an oddity, and they wouldn't have to be necessarily that wide, but were. And the main entrance, which may be this one, heralds the summer solstice and things. And he shows you where he's looked up in there, in the Gilgal Raphaim. You can look it up in Wikipedia. It shows you this place and stuff. Wheel of the Giants. And you look it up, and supposedly King Og of Bashan was killed by Moses and his group of people here at the end. And he shows you where you go to Ruj El Hiri, and they show you that this outermost ring is over 500 foot, internal bulges, and everything, and interesting information about it. We're just going to continue on though, and y'all can look this up separately so you can get some information. This is the view inside of a burial place that is known to have been built some 2,000 years after the pottery and stuff that was found there in the first place. But what we apparently are looking at is some pre-pottery Neolithic, and they don't want to talk about that. But you can Google image it and get right down to it. Here's one image from the outsides of it, and the image from a distance, but looking all the way across the whole thing, so that's the size of it, and how it's a giant structure here, and it's a lot bigger than Stonehenge, maybe not as impressive in some rights. But then something interesting happens. He does the CFAPs, and he decides to start looking around just a little bit on Google Maps, and you can see all these dents in these areas that don't look the same till you get down close, and these symmetrical marks and things that look like things were going on back then, which may have been as simple as old ancient settlements. And you could find the place where they settled for a few days or longer and went after that. Some people have said some of this could have been stealing rocks from an around area and then taking them back down some of these paths that you may have seen and trying to make a structure for Roman inhabitation, which would probably entail whenever they came down and kicked the butt of Israel and what you know of as the Jewish revolt and ending, and then what ended in what is Armageddon. So there's a lot of these weird circles on here, and you even, now we just looked at those ones that look like South Africa, but there are some of those here where you see it like this, and that's just a huge cluster of it, and giant in size. That's that snake, and here's the head of the snake, and here's what somebody said might have been a Roman encampment. It was built upon something that was already there, and then they took local rocks that were from there. But you can look at something like these old little walls and ripples built around here, and this has got to be incredibly old. And I don't think much, if any, of this has been investigated. Square walls built and so on. Looks like it's just off north, but we're not quite facing north, are we? He's gone around and around looking at it. But these marks and these lines and these walls that are down here that you can see have been here for a long, long time. And not just there, but you can see a giant wall that outlined this whole thing that was there. That appears to be missing a spot, and then he comes to find that giant triangle thing that's there. And what type fort is this? Because of that in and out looking shape that goes around on it is similar to the Sumerian in and out corbelled outsides that they have, and the earliest of Egyptian stuff has this, but it's definitely more stepped in. And why are there so many steps? And is this kind of a arrowhead look, or is this a pyramid shape? And why is it built as a pyramid? Is it because of the ground? Is it because of where the point lines up to? This doesn't even appear to be a right triangle. It's not quite. And where it comes into it, looks like you may have been able to set up guard here, but then there was a secondary in the internal of it. So it's a kind of a odd structure built off of it here. But all kinds of things near it. And you can see stuff that's pretty much buried over here, and there's another circle right here. And just out of view, let's see if he rotates around where you can see it. This thing would fit a football field inside of it easy. Look at this circle here. And all of this encampment looking spots. And I don't know if some of this stuff is built a little bit sooner or later. Someone ought to look into us, into it, and all of the different ones of them. And just because it looks like this, let's see, like the tell version, when we first realized the concept of a tell, where it's like, well, this thing wasn't built on a mound. The mound is built off of them living there for a long time, and lo and behold, this ancient place goes back to 9,000 years BC or 8,000 years BC. What does it do? Like the first of ancient cities and stuff. And look at these troughs and these cut-in areas and these circles and these structures here. That's kind of amazing. And then this connective wall with these big circle structures. And you think, well, that's got to be grain keeping things and stuff. And then there's this long line that's up here. See this? It's like an airstrip thing. And then these pieces here that are 3/4 walled that go around. And that structure that's there that has that strange look that we're going to call Natufian from now on. But yeah, one more look at that. That's strange. But what if that's just more of a modern type thing? And these are from this area that's here. You'll find that a lot of the stuff that he found is right up here, and he's marked them. These earthworks and stuff that are here. And so he's going to tell you about how much farther they are in miles. We're going to talk about miles pretty soon, but roughly from the spot to there, 4 miles. About 6 to go over there, but that's cutting at a diagonal. So you can Google image this yourself on maps and then start zooming around, but don't go shoved all the way down. You have to reach it up at a certain point. Boy, I don't know if you can see it. If it shows up, is my pointer still showing up? Yeah, maybe it shows up. That's a cow. That little dot down there right next to me, I'm pointing at its nose now, that's a cow. So if that's any indication of the size of this area, yeah, it's hundreds of feet. So somebody in his comments, because he didn't make a mention of that snake that was there, that was right above that first thing that was looked at in the circle. And you can see where we're talking about, the Dead Sea, the Red Sea, and it running in Egypt. But let's look at this one huge serpent above the wheel. And he was able to quickly make this movie, apparently, because the other one came out, and within like 4 hours, he had already seen their comments and made another one and put it out. Let's blow it up. So you can see there what we're looking at. They're trying to force me to monetize too, guys. I may have to, or they basically aren't going to pimp me at all. The graphics just aren't there yet. It's not pulling up at HD. But what's weird is, in this shape of the serpent, there are huge amounts of these little mounds all over everywhere. And short of this one that may or may not be, they're all within an area, they're all circles, all inside of this serpent trench mound thing that runs almost exactly as he says, the size of the one in the Nazca lines that he did a video on recently, because he remembers the size of it. I forget what it is, 430 meters, something like that. But you can tell how clustered in these are, and it's all just inside of there. I don't know if the contrast is really showing you. But that leads up to the mouth of the serpent. And on the mouth of the serpent, that's where maybe it's a Roman fort, maybe not. Look at this circle that's right here. And all these places, and that one that was right up from there, and here's another one right next to it, and all these places that are pretty much buried in its pseudo lidar you've got going now, with just seeing little ridges of stuff. And if there was any vegetation going on here, you would know any of this existed. Just because it's become a desert here in the last few thousand years didn't mean it was a desert back in ancient times, and there used to be quite a bit of rainfall into this area. It didn't used to be Dust Bowl, Oklahoma. In fact, Dust Bowl, Oklahoma didn't used to be Dust Bowl, Oklahoma. So there's the tail, and we don't really look at that, but he just keeps zooming in on portions of it. I think this is quite interesting, and I wonder just if any, or which ones, or what has been investigated on any of this. Whenever you look at the wheel that they talked about, which is just below this right now, in this area here that almost looks burnt, and there's 2 circles. There's an oddity there. But everything there is orange too that you can see, and so that might dictate iron and smelting and all kinds of things that we're not sure if people looked at. That circle is just below here, though, by the way. Now you can see it. And so there's the serpent and his head, and all through his body, zigzag back down through there, and it looks like it has a coordinated zigzag. It zigs and then it zags. And I'm just wondering that if the zig isn't the size of, or the direction of a solstice or an equinox, and the zag isn't the same thing on the other end, and you're seeing this, like the serpent mound that's found in Americas, that's real famous. It looks like it's on a golf course that's eating the egg and things, but people have figured out that even the wiggles that are all along its body correlate to the moon phases and all kinds of stuff if you stand at this one point. And people didn't even ever wonder about that one point, and it looks like the thing that used to be where that one point isn't there anymore. So it shows up like Nazca lines, but wide. I don't think he measures how wide it is, but looking at it, you can see where it is in relation to Galilee. And if people just never looked at this point and seen, so what is it? 1,380 meters, and that's the one that pretty much matched up to Nazca lines and so on. But where this area is at is pretty much the Golan Heights area, if you will, and it runs off these ancient river valley sets that have all dried up long ago, but into the flat plains here, which might also explain why it looks the way that it does. Anyhow, guys, like, share, subscribe, and enjoy, and we'll see if anybody in the comments comes with anything about this or some papers that are about it. But if you look it up, they say it's 3500 BC, but then they're not even figuring pre-pottery, Neolithic, or anything like that. I think these ancient stories of giants are just simply the taller people, for Cro-Magnon's DNA and genetics are extant today. You might see somebody that's 6'9" and you go, God, he looks like a giant. And that's effectively what they were talking about in the day. Stories get exaggerated. You do realize that. And so over time, we kind of have to look back and peer through the truth of what a giant is, and what a dragon is, and where does this mythology come from, and what's the truth of kernel that's inside of that. Anyhow, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, and we're off again. Hey, and check out CFAP's channel. It's like the second or third time I've pimped him now. It's a good guy out of Vegas doing a lot of good work. Peace.